Hello, everybody. It is late on a Sunday for the recap for UFC Lewis versus Spivak, which it became Kennedy Nzechukwu versus Ion Kudalaba, which might be one of the worst main events in terms of impact and name value in UFC history. But hey, the fight was actually fairly decent. This card in general was actually pretty okay. There wasn't a lot of impact. Like there wasn't future champions, or title resumes really stamped here. But there was like some nice coming out parties here. Kennedy looked, after a shaky first round, looked good. Waldo Cortes Acosta did get a win. I still have significant worries, but he did answer some of the questions I had going into the fight. Muslim Salikhov had a nice finish. Jack Della Maddalena went and did his thing. Jennifer Maia either showed new dimension, new life into her game, or Marina Moroz just kind of horrendously fell off. Take your pick. Ricky Turcios looks like he is some version of his old self. Vanessa Demopoulos looked notably better than I expected, and Natalia Silva did her thing. So like, there were some nice performances, some questions answered, and I guess that's really all we're supposed to get off of fight nights now, which is fine. Also going to talk a little bit about the Bellator. Going to talk a little bit about one. I have not watched either of them in their entirety. I have watched what I kind of wanted from the Bellator card. I'm going to pull it up here real quick. I did watch Vadim Nemkov versus Corey Anderson, which was a big fight. I did watch Usman Nurmagomedov kind of have his way with Patricky Pitbull. I did watch Kizriev beat Daniel Weichel, the surprising knockout of Terrell Fortune, and that was kind of about it. I do really want to go back and look at Sullivan Cauley versus Jay Raddick, because I'm legitimately interested in what Sullivan Cauley can be. Although Jay Raddick is a weird one. Does anyone have and maybe they'll talk about this on the broadcast. Does anyone have any idea why a dude who at least passes the eyeball test of like really good athlete, Jay Raddick, is 3-1 at the age of 38? Like, didn't start fighting professionally until 2018, so he would have been 34, 33 maybe. It's a bit weird. Like he did have an amateur career that dates back to like 2012. But I don't know. It was just kind of weird, because like looking at that fight, it was like, oh, 3-0 guy, Sullivan Cauley, this could be interesting. And then I pop it up and it's like, wait, he's 38? It was just one of those like really bizarre moments for me. Also a bit weird that he fights out of fights primarily in Pacific Northwest promotions, but fights out of Philadelphia. But anyways, I need to go back and watch that fight at some point. I do have to lay in to Bellator, because I would against the UFC if they did this. And that is, I do have to say that having your fighters wait for hours at a hospital for like something as basic as stitches. Obviously, if you need like an MRI, head scan, whatever, those are things that you can't really prepare for. You're not going to have that cage side. But the idea that you didn't have a cage side doctor to handle stitches, getting bleeding stopped, that kind of thing, is not good. And we're going to finish off this little intro with a little bit of a dark note. The original Green Ranger, Jason David Frank, is it Jason David Frank? I'm gonna kick myself if I got the name wrong, because that's just rude. Yeah, Jason David Frank passed away at the age of 49. That's a shame. He seemed like a lovely, lovely person from what little I could remember. I mean, obviously, I grew up on this guy. Like, I remember watching him on TV in the Power Rangers era in like second grade, first grade. So, obviously, childhood hero. And, that's a rough blow. It's not like the Anthony Rumble Johnson one where it's been a dark time because we've lost in MMA. We've lost Elias Theodorou and Anthony Johnson, and now we lose someone who is more MMA adjacent than just MMA, although he did have MMA fights. But we lose Jason Dave Frank. Anyways, let's move on here. Let's do our thing. And let's talk about the UFC. Alrighty. So, I didn't move my notes onto the main screen here. Let me fix that. Okay. So, main event, not main event, because we lost Derek Lewis and Sergey Spivak to, I still don't have details on it. It appears to be some kind of illness. They said not COVID, not weight cutting related. So, my guess is food poisoning for Derek Lewis. We got Ion Cutelaba versus Kennedy Nzechukwu instead. First round was Cutelaba kind of doing his normal thing. He pressured, had Kennedy a little bit stunned and then went for the takedown. Didn't really get much done. Like, he did get a trip takedown eventually, got mount position, but did very, very little with it. Ended up back on the feet and then was working for a Kimura standing, which was never going to work. And this is actually the first time I felt that, like, Cutelaba might just be a little bit too small for this division. Like, he's a super strong dude. Very strong. But he's 6'1", 75-inch reach. Maybe he goes down to middleweight. Like, that might actually be a legitimate question here because it does feel like he's just going to be fighting guys who are bigger than him, and his major asset is power and strength. So, I don't know. I don't know if it's possible. I don't, like, he's very muscled up. He's very jacked up. So, I doubt that there's a ton of weight he can cut without getting into the muscle. But it does feel like 185 might call for him. Anyways, so Cutelaba takes the first round, just basically off of control. Round two, Kennedy looks way more comfortable. He's been through there for a round. He's had the trauma of the fight worked out for him. And he just starts countering, like, kind of at will. Like, Cutelaba comes in, boom, here's a punch. Boom, you're changing levels to go for a takedown. Boom, here's a knee. And even when Cutelaba is getting onslaughted on and kicks him in the balls, I think it was a kick, Kennedy's like, no, we're going. He doesn't take, like, any time to recover. Keeps it going, puts him on the cage. Boom, 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 boom. And the referee steps in to stop this fight. This second round was a really good performance for Kennedy. And it's a big deal because in the preview video, if you've watched that, episode 60, you heard me talk a lot about the Nikolai Negumereanu fight for Kennedy. And that was a fight where Negumereanu tried to do a process in which he hunts down the opponent, puts pressure on him, and makes them feel his strength, his clinch, his so on, and use that trauma. And Kennedy really was scared of that against Negumereanu. It said he was very timid. He was very non-engagement with Negumereanu. Here, not so much. He felt the clinch. He had a bad round. He always does to start. He's a slow starter. And then he went and said, you know what? This actually isn't so bad. If he can translate that into other fights, because Ion Cutelaba is, like I said, is a super strong clinch guy. He's a Greco-Roman guy. So if he can gain confidence from this and from the Roberson fight that he had before, Kennedy Nzechukwu is a really scary prospect. 6'5", massively athletic, 205er who can, I think, crush a lot of skulls. Honestly. And I'm looking forward to it. Next opponent, I've got him facing the winner of Jimmy Crute and Alonzo Menafield. Crute is a super physical prospect as well. Menafield is a super hard-hitting guy. These are the type of guys that have historically been able to put some fear in Kennedy. Let's see if Let's see if he can do it again. Let's see if we can keep moving it up to a scarier and scarier dude with more unpredictable offense and see if he keeps responding in these positive ways. And for Keon Kudalaba, I said perhaps he goes down a weight class. I think the UFC will keep him, despite the fact that I think this is a third straight loss in a row for him. I could be mistaken. Let me quickly look at this here. He's lost 6 of his last 7. Because he lost to Ankalaev twice. The draw with Jacoby, beat Devin Clark, has lost now to Spawn, Walker, and Kennedy. He could get cut off this, but I could also see him experimenting with 185. I could also see him fighting the loser of Jimmy Crute and Alonso Menafield. And those are probably fights that he probably is still built to possibly win, because they're both guys who are used to their own sense of physicality, their own sense of destruction. And it could be interesting. Chase Sherman got mollywopped by Waldo, Cortes, Acosta. I scored all 3 rounds for Acosta. I even scored a 10-8 second round where he hurt him a bunch of times. The first round saw some interesting questions asked by Chase Sherman. He went for the takedown. He did get it with not nearly enough time to do anything with it, but instantly went to side control. So had he been able to replicate that, maybe we would have seen something very, very different. He was landing some good leg kicks, replicating some of Jared Van Der Ra's tactics, which were working against Waldo, Cortes, Acosta in their fight. But he gassed out, and he just kind of stopped doing what was working. He would still try to throw the leg kick, for example, in round 2, but his head would be completely stationary. There'd be no setup. It would just be a naked kick. And Cortes Acosta would just be like, I'm just going to punch you in the face then. And he would do it, and it would hurt him numerous times, had him rocked probably a good half dozen times in the second and third round. And Sherman couldn't really get the takedowns, couldn't really put effective pressure on him. And Cortes Acosta got tired, but kept fighting, kept throwing hard counters, and really got the job done. The question, I guess, is, do I still believe there is a... Not do I still... Do I still have massive questions about Waldo Cortes Acosta? Yes. This is the second fight in a row where, until the opponent stopped being smart about it and got tired, his legs got eaten up significantly, provoking clear physical responses from him to leg kicks. He's also still not the most nuanced striker in the world, but I did like that he was throwing more in combinations this fight. I still don't think he has great power. A lot is made of his power, and I don't know. He didn't finish Van Der Raa despite hitting him pretty hard. He didn't finish Chase Sherman despite hitting him very hard. And those are durable fighters. They're tough guys. They're long-term heavyweights who have the basic durability. But the thing is, he's going to fight guys like that on a constant basis. And if he can't be relied upon to finish, and I still don't think he has 3 rounds of cardio, because he got tired in a pretty slow-paced fight with Van Der Raa, and then in this one it was more understandable because it was a higher pace. For heavyweight, this is a ridiculous pace fight. Let me see here. Strikes landed. So this fight, he landed 147 significant strikes. There were 200 and change. And then last fight, it was 120, 130. So, much higher output this time. Perfectly okay with that being a gassing performance. But there is the question that, you're going to have to go 15 minutes. Can you fix this cardio problem long term? And can you stop showboating? That's the other thing, is he started showboating in this one again in the second round. I just don't like that part of him. But I will say his responses to trials and tribulations in this fight were much better than they were in Van Der Raa. So He is a better fighter after fighting Chase Sherman than he was against Van der Aa. He has the base level athleticism you need. He is strong. He moves fairly well on his feet. He has good hand speed. And he pushes through even when he's tired. So there's something here. But it does feel like he still has a lot of development to do, and that the UFC is normally not really the place to do that. Because what do you do with him after this? Because, like, I was looking at it like, dude is now like one spot below Martin Buday in the rankings. So, like, it makes sense that he fight Martin Buday next. And Martin Buday is a super tough dude who probably actually does have way more bad intentions. And it's kind of weird because he's not exactly a deep fighter himself, but like way more adaptability than Chase Sherman or Jared Van der Aa have. So that could be a trouble fight, but like, let's see it. Because otherwise you're just like kind of bringing guys in for him to beat. And for Chase Sherman, I've been saying this for what feels like years now, and it probably has been years. I want to see him retire. It's not that I don't enjoy watching him fight. It's not that I don't believe he can't win fights at a UFC level or a high-end regional level. It's not that I don't think he's... It's not that I think he's like so physically shot that he can't compete, because he clearly still can. But he doesn't want to be there. He does not want to be there at any point. And I don't know this for a fact, obviously, but like I feel like Chase Sherman got into fighting because his family and his friends and himself wanted to try it. And he doesn't want to get out of fighting because he doesn't want to let people down. That's not really based on anything. It's based on the idea that like every time he's in there, it is not a comfortable experience in any way. And his interviews also don't seem like he enjoys fighting. And if that is the case, please stop. That's all I got for that. Muslim Salikhov, Andre Fiallo. Fiallo started out pretty well, actually. I thought he came out pressuring him a little bit. Had a good counter and fucked Salikhov's eye up after he went for a spinning kick. And generally speaking, kind of did his thing. Like, he made Salikhov go for takedowns. Like, that's the thing. Like when you can force Salikhov to go for takedowns and be really worried about his eye, you've done a good job. The problem is that after that, in the second round and into the third round, he just looked lost. He looked confused. He looked like he couldn't pick up his reads properly on what Salikhov was doing. Salikhov was mixing in spinning back fists and spinning kicks and hitting him to the body a boatload. And at the end of the second round, Fiallo goes back to the corner. His coach is going like, do you want this? And Fiallo's not responding anyway, and they just let him go out there anyways. And this is, again, and I have banged on this drum for a long, long time. At some point, can we please like have corners have the balls to save fighters from themselves? Like I get it. Many fighters have said, if you throw the towel in, I'm leaving your camp. Let them leave. Let them leave. Because there's really no way that Fiallo, not that the second round was like a terrible, terrible round or anything, but it was clear that Fiallo was really stuck in not having ideas of what to do, having all kinds of hesitation on pressure, getting countered very, very hard, and was kind of just rocked. And the third round was very, very ugly. We saw Salikhov basically just cut the cage off, put Fiallo against the cage, spinning back kick to the body, spin kick to the head, bunch of other punches in there as well, and the referee stepped in to call for a standing TKO. Fiallo kind of protested, but not really. It was a very good stoppage. That fight was getting very scary. And despite being 38 years old, Salikhov has still got his thing. Like, he's not going to be a champion. He's not going to move into the top echelons of the promotion, but he is still going to be a first-rate, high-end action fighter. He still is, and incredibly creative and hard to deal with. So Salikhov versus Randy Brown has a boatload of stuff for me. I don't know. Like, Randy Brown is a fighter that, like, I go between thinking is a very smart fighter and thinking is an absolute idiot. And I just want to see him fight the king of Kung Fu. And for Fiallo, honestly, some time off to rethink things and get things ready. If you want to put him in there again, Brian Battle kind of feels appropriate. But I don't know. I've kind of been hoping that Fiallo would come around. Not necessarily on wins, because honestly, it's not Fiallo's wins and losses that are the problem. Because if you look at his record since coming to the UFC, he's 2-3. The loss to Jake Matthews was bad. The loss in debut to Michel Pereira, and then this one, not really that much of a problem. But he landed 17-6 strikes in this fight, 18 against Matthews. And then his wins over Van Camp and Miguel Baeza were even, well, not so much Baeza, but like Van Camp was even like really way scarier than it probably should have been. So I don't know. I think that he needs some time to recuperate and figure out what's going on, because I still think he fundamentally has problems with his. Oh boy, Argos just took the lead in the Grey Cup. I got the scoreboard on the one screen here. It's 24-23 with 3 minutes and 40 seconds to go. Go Bombers. I don't like the Bombers, and they've been really successful lately, but I have to cheer against the Argos. Moving on to a fight that probably also shouldn't have happened. Danny Roberts, Jack Della Maddalena. Jack destroyed him. I understand that Jack Della Maddalena has not fought a lot of high-end fighters yet. Honestly. Like beating Ramazan Ameev, beating Pete Rodriguez, beating Angelosa on the Dana White Contender Series. These are all fights that probably don't actually mean a ton. They're kind of the bottom end of the division. And Danny Roberts is a step up from those guys. It doesn't change the fact that this was just an ugly fight that Roberts asked no questions. Roberts has never done well against anyone who can match his speed. He has never done well against people who can hit him hard. He hasn't done well really in the UFC period. Like his wins are all fights that have aged rather poorly. And even some of his losses, Nordine Taleb, Claudio Silva, have aged kind of like poorly. So I don't know. I don't know why this fight happened. I don't know why I just clicked on Mike Perry. But it wasn't good. Give Della Maddalena someone interesting. May I suggest Max Griffin? May I suggest Daniel Roberts gets cut? Or Danny Roberts gets cut? Zhalga Zhumagulov versus Charles Johnson. There was some controversy for how this fight was scored. I did score a 29-28 for Johnson, but I want to put cards on the table here. I gave Johnson the second round by an incredibly close margin, and the third round was also pretty close. So he did not convincingly win any of these three rounds, and I think it's fair to say that Zhumagulov did win the first round. So I totally get why there is controversy when it comes to this split decision. I agreed with the cards put in by Derek Cleary and Sal D'Amato, and I do not mind the Douglas Crosby one where he scored it for Zhumagulov. So three judges that I actually routinely do not get along with. I think they all came up with perfectly fine cards here. Media scored it very heavily for Zhumagulov. I don't have a problem with it. Let's have a look at the stats here for this fight, because that probably is what's going to tell us here. So Zhumagulov did outland him in the first and the second round, so I get that. But I think in the third round or in the second round, which is really where this comes down to, you had Zhumagulov getting poked in the eye, not getting it stopped, crashing into the clinch pretty well, doing smart things, but then you would get Johnson firing back on the counter very effectively. You would get Charles Johnson starting the round quite strongly. And I thought just had some quality shots there that had Zhumagulov much more hurt. This is also a dirty fight, by the way, because we had 2 ball shots, 3 eye pokes. 2 eye pokes and then a partial eye poke where it was, the replay showed it was kind of the palm that grazed the eye. I'm not sure what the legality actually of that is. I think people have said that it's entirely legal, but like, if you hit someone with your palm, like kind of open palm, is that not like kind of raking at the face? I'm not sure. I don't know, but it was a weird one. But that was a break that Zhumagulov got that wasn't technically earned in the first round. But the third round is what kind of annoys me, because like in the third round, Johnson clearly hurt his leg. And he started not really moving correctly. I think they said it was probably a nerve issue, but Zhumagulov like pressured him for a little bit, threw some shots, and then backed off. You've got a one-legged opponent there. Not fully, because like it's not like the leg was collapsing underneath Johnson, but there was clearly something wrong with it. He's stamping it on the cage, trying to wake it up. And you don't take more of an advantage of that. I think, honestly, in that regard, Zhumagulov deserved to lose the fight. Because when presented with an opportunity to really take the fight, because the third round is the best round for Johnson, he hurts his leg. You put the pressure on him, you easily win rounds 1 and 3, and then all 3 rounds on one card. Like, the chance was there to secure it, and that's why I really do not mind Zhumagulov losing this fight. Because it's kind of been the whole thing is like, I think he's approaching this the wrong way. Like, he'll take time off, and he'll have cardio issues, and you can't do that in a 3-round fight. Not at flyweight. Not at flyweight. People are going to have the cardio to keep up with it. And I guess what I'm saying is, like, I have some remote faith in Charles Johnson to develop his game and become a better fighter and figure out his identity than I have with Zhumagulov, who seems very rooted in the idea of, like, I was a Fight Nights champion, Global Fight Nights champion, and I have tuned myself to championship fights, 5-rounders, where I can have a round off, and it's just not going to work out for him in the UFC. So he needs losses like this to remind him, and the Jeff Molina fight was kind of the same thing, that he's got to approach these fights differently. And I think it'll get him cut. He's 1-5 in the UFC, so I do feel bad about that. But I don't know. I'm just not bothered by Johnson winning this fight, despite maybe on paper, Zhumagulov probably should have. For Johnson, I got Cody Durden next. A guy who will kind of do some of the same things that Mokaev did, but like with better striking, and like see what he deals with it. See how he deals with it. And we'll figure out maybe learn something about Mokaev on the flip side. Jennifer Maia versus Marina Barros, which got upgraded to the feature prelim. And this was a pretty good fight. Very surprising one, because honestly, I thought Moroz would have an easy time. I thought she was going to be faster at range because Maia is known as a plotter. I thought that if there were first clinches by Maia, that Moroz could handle it and possibly even put Maia on her back. I didn't think Moroz could hurt Maia, and therefore it was going to go to decision, but I thought it would be a fairly clear-cut decision for the former Ukrainian national boxer. It was not. Maia won the first 2 rounds pretty easily. In a nutshell, Maia's hand speed looked way better. She had a great counter game. Moroz would throw the same basic 3 variations of a combination at her, and Maia would just pick it apart. when Morose would do something different, either a longer combination or a different entry, she would have success, but she wasn't able to do that very often. She would almost constantly go back to her staples, and Maia would then just pick her apart. They would clinch, and nothing would really happen there. And I thought Morose's corner was also completely useless, because at the end of the second round, they're just like, she's getting tired, she's getting tired, she's getting tired, and there's no substance to what she has to do. You need to tell her that she needs different combinations. You need to tell her to go to the deeper reservoir that I would assume a national boxer has. But this is the second time in a relatively short period of time that the Ukrainian national team has really kind of let us down here, because we had wrestler Ludovic Shalinian against Johnny Munoz, where it's like, the literal technique is fine, but the application for MMA is terrible. And Morose was kind of the same here, where it's like, okay, yes, that 3-piece combination looks really nice. That jab looks crisp, looks straight, looks technically pretty, but I know it's coming. And there's no nuance to it. There's no disguise. And I just throw back. And the interesting thing, really, the really interesting thing is that, like I said, we're used to Maia being kind of slow. And she looked fast in this one. Now, there are some people being like, hey, Maia's back in the title picture. Please, God, no. Because there's nothing she offers the title picture. Please, no. I would love to see her fight Vivi Araujo, though. I would. And for Morose, bear with me for a moment here, because this is going to sound like a bit of a joke. But what about her versus Molly McCann? Because Molly McCann is a creative, somewhat powerful striker. Morose is a very predictable but high output striker. Is that not a recipe for a win for either fighter, and 2, just a fun fight and appropriate to the level of both, because they're kind of close to each other in the rankings? Now, of course, the worry is that Morose actually has really good takedowns from the clinch. She could just clinch Molly McCann and embarrass her, but to be honest, I'm not overly certain that anyone of any real notability won't do that to Molly McCann. And Morose doesn't have the greatest of clinch entries. Like, a lot of her success in the clinch historically, you look back at the Maria Agapova fight, is almost the other fighter being pretty willing to clinch with her. So if Molly McCann makes it a priority to just avoid the clinch, we could have a pretty fun fight. So I'm throwing that idea out there. Hopefully you like it. Miles Johns versus Vince Morales sucked. I don't have much to say. Essentially, it was Johns throwing with mean intentions, but not really having a good grasp of range. Not throwing a ton of volume. Shooting for power takedowns and not really getting them. I'm actually wondering how many strikes were supposed to be landed in this fight. Supposedly 39-38. Which does not make it the most inactive fight of the card. That goes to Fernie Garcia, Brady Heastan. But I don't know. I'm not sure I even really agree with those. Let's see here. 10-8 in the first round for Johns, 13-11 for Johns in the second round, and 20-15 Morales in the third. The third at least did pick up. I will give it that. And 1 for 12 on takedowns for Miles Johns. Morales did an excellent job of defending. I respect that. But at no point did he impose anything on the fight. At no point did he step the pace up. And that is unforgivable against a guy like Miles Johns, who has a history of gassing. Make him fight hard, and the opportunities will come there. Yes, you will expose yourself to danger, but Morales is a pretty tough kid. So I just thought that game plan-wise, this was terrible. Miles Johns gets kind of a pass because apparently, number one, he's moved over to Glory MMA and Fitness with James Krause. James Krause was banned from his corner. He said the UFC, but I suspect it was probably more the Athletic Commission. Because, of course, there is all kinds of questions right now about James Krause, fight betting, fight fixing, maybe. And, yeah, I don't know. Don't watch this fight. It's not worth it. It showed off kind of like the very problem Morales has, which is doesn't really seem to be able to enforce a game on anybody. And he's maybe too dedicated of a counter striker. That you have to give him opportunities, and they have to be pretty wide opportunities for him to take advantage of. Speaking of fights, Miles Johns versus Timur Valiev. I want to see what happens when Johns runs into someone who has good athleticism. Morales versus Mana Martinez just feels like maybe a fun fight because Martinez is very, very counterable and will be very, very aggressive. And we'll see if Morales can do better. Ricky Turcios versus Kevin Natividad. And this was a fun fight, I'll say that, but it was also frustrating as hell. We had Alex Morono in Turcios' corner, which presumes he's over at Woodlands instead of Team Alpha Male, which is good. So I always thought Team Alpha Male was a terrible, terrible fit for him. Again, I want to say this. I am going to shit on a gym later that I actually do think is bad. But it's not that Team Alpha Male is a bad gym. It's that Team Alpha Male produces essentially one successful stereotype of fighter. And it's why I don't like Slavaclaus, Borshep being there. I don't like Ricky Turcios being there, is they are not that archetype of fighter. And I thought it was turning Turcios into the wrong thing. And he came out here and he was the old Ricky Turcios, which is, you take me down, I'm going to scramble, you hurt me, I'm going to recover incredibly quickly, I'm going to do my things. I gave Natividad the first round. I gave Turcios the first round. I gave Natividad the second and the third. I have no problem with Turcios winning this fight. It's just that I thought that Natividad in the second and third round hurting Turcios was enough to swing those rounds to his favor. But they were very, very close. And we saw Turcios scramble off his back and generally do his thing. Let's see here. What were the actual scores? Because this was another split decision. And we had Derek Cleary giving 1 and 3 to Turcios. That is weird because I do think... No, wait, that's fine. That's fine. I'm thinking wrong. Sal D'Amato 1 and 3 to Turcios. I'm fine with that as well. Anthony Manus gave 1 and 2 to Natividad, which I guess also makes sense. So they're okay scorecards. Let's have a look at the stats here, because this is, again, another fight where having some stats to look at would be fine. Turcios outlanded him in the first, like I thought. Outlanded him in the second. So he outlanded him in all 3 rounds. So it's realistically, it's Natividad's damage that has to be his winning factor, which makes sense. That is the primary judging criteria. Don't worry. We're going to talk a lot about damage when we get to freaking Heastan versus Garcia. Yeah, I don't know. It can go either way. The bad look here for Natividad is Natividad let this fight be Turcios' fight. Because Turcios has no actual capability of enforcing anything on an opponent. He's not a good enough takedown artist. He's not powerful enough as a striker. He's not... confidence is not the right word. He's not... How do I put this? Because confidence is not the right word. He's not structured enough, smooth enough, nuanced enough, technical enough to really make you do much with his striking. He kind of needs you to just be dumb. And Natividad gave him that with constantly taking him down to get out scrambled. Natividad gets cut. I don't really see how not. He's done quite poorly. And for Turcios, I've got Johnny Munoz. There you go. Vanessa Demopoulos had a really good showing against Maria Oliveira. I thought Oliveira started the round, or started basically every round well, throwing some long-range shots, getting some work done. But she basically got hit really hard in every round, got taken down, got controlled, has no idea what she's doing off of her back beyond surviving, has no get-up game, has no sweep game, has no ability to force scrambles. I don't know. And they kept being like, she's got Paulo Costa in her corner. I'm like, that is not a remotely good thing. I don't think Paulo Costa is a guy you want giving you advice, both on fighting and life. I thought Demopoulos won all 3 rounds. If you gave Oliveira the 3rd, which one judge did, it's fine. But yeah, Maria Oliveira is quite bad. And Demopoulos versus Tabitha Ricci, because my question with Demopoulos is that she's done very well grappling against people who I don't think know how to grapple. What is she going to do with someone who can grapple? There you go. Put her in there with Tabitha Ricci. Let's see what happens with Baby Shark. And Oliveira versus Lavina Souza, if she's still around, does feel like an absolute shit show, but also like it would be a lot of fun. Ferdy Garcia, Chris T-Stan. Garcia knocked him down, or at least rocked him early. T-Stan then basically spent the remainder of the fight pushing for takedowns, trying to get positions, scrambling. Garcia having some decent moments of his own offense. T-Stan clearly won the 2nd, clearly won the 3rd. I am fine. Or pardon me, clearly won the 3rd. 2nd was 50-50. But here's the thing. There were people who had this 30-27 for T-Stan. No. T-Stan was the only person who got hurt in the first round. He was hurt badly in the first round. And he achieved very, very little with his top position. 2 minutes, or 2.5 minutes maybe, of control time does not undo getting your ass knocked down. That is my opinion. That is how the rules are written. Let us look at the stats here for a moment. Round 1, T-Stan landed 3 significant strikes and got rocked. And you want to give him the round for 3 minutes and 25 seconds of top control while he got reversed and got a submission attempt locked onto him. No. I'm fine with him winning. I'm fine with it. But 30-27 is a no. Fun fight in its own way, but sloppy. Easton versus the winner of, or the loser, pardon me, of Journey Newsom and Sergey Morozov. Fernie Garcia versus Christian Rodriguez. There you go. Natalia Silva, Teresa Blade. This was a really good performance from Silva. She did probably lose the first round. She let Blade have some top control and a triangle choke for a lot of it, like specifically the triangle choke being very, very close. Felder was loving it a little bit more than I was. I thought it was loose enough. I thought maybe the armbar might actually be more the advantage there, not the choke. But there is a certain element of like definitely the most closest to ending the fight in the first round was Bleda. She was on top for some control time. She did have a good first round. And then she got tired. And Silva started countering her, started shut the clinch completely down, and was able to break the clinch, show off her ability. The only downside I can say for Silva is, number one, the trouble she got in round 1 with the triangle choke and just the ground game in general was self-indulged because she went for a head and arm throw against Bleda and it backfired, as it often does with the head and arm throw. When she was at range, she dominated this fight. Bleda had nothing for her despite being a 5'9" fighter. Although I do think Silva is taller than 5'4". There is no way there were 5 inches of height and play in here. I'd say she's probably more like 5'5", 5'6", 5'7". But that's just me. And eventually she got an absolute amazing spinning kick to the head when Bleda was getting ready to shoot in, knockout in the 3rd round. That was phenomenal. Phenomenal. But she needs to learn to avoid the clinch. She's good at defending in the clinch. She's quick on the ground. But there is no mystery to me about why she has a bunch of losses in her career because of probably just kind of doing what you feel like. And it's probably why she's 14-5-1. Because a girl with this level of quickness, of understanding of technique, of power, of athleticism and physicality should not have 5 losses before she makes it to the big show. But I can guarantee, I'm pretty sure why it is, because she is way too willing to go to terrible, terrible places. So hopefully she doesn't do that in future fights. And I have her fighting Melissa Gatto. It's kind of a flat fight because Gatto herself is coming off a loss. But it's 2 fighters who have a boatload of physicality, who are really strong and have really, really bad instincts. So I think it actually will be pretty good and really interesting. Bleda, I'm taking the really boring one here. She lost to Natalia Silva. She must fight the other lady who lost to Natalia Silva, Jasmine Jasudavicius. There you go. Yeah, so over to Bellator. Vadim Nemkov beating Corey Anderson. Pretty cool. I will say, I'm going to get into something here a little bit. I want to bring this out. Is on Twitter, so one of the MMA journalists asked, what Bellator champions do you think could are most likely to beat a UFC champion? Do supercard, heavyweight champ, lightweight versus lightweight, etc. And some people said Vadim Nemkov. Now, I will say I would pick Yuri Prohaska to beat Vadim Nemkov in a second. He's beaten him before, and I think a lot of the same dynamics do still apply. But the UFC bias is a little bit heavy here because, frankly, we're talking about a fight that occurred in Ryzen with a 10-minute first round, and it was the 10 minutes that wore down Vadim Nemkov. And it was Nemkov in his, I want to say, 5th fight. Maybe 6th fight? Nemkov Prohaska. 7th fight. 7th fight. 7th pro fight. And his biggest opponents up until that point had been Gorian Reljic and Joaquim Ferreira. Let's be honest here. It was a very raw Vadim Nemkov. The Vadim Nemkov that exists now probably started forming about 3 fights later against Felipe Lins. Probably. And then continue with the Liam McGeary fight, the Phil Davis fight. He's shown it off. Don't get me wrong. Again, I would pick Yuri Prohaska to win that fight. But there is a little bit of dismissal to it that I think just underplays how good Bellator is. And at least their top end fighters are. Because the other irony here is everyone was oh no, Johnny Eblen is too small to beat Alex Pereira. And these are the same people who are pointing towards people who are in the top 15 in the UFC, outside the top 10, and saying oh, they would easily beat Alex Pereira because wrestling. Eblen has very good wrestling. If your view is that all it takes is to beat Pereira is an explosive wrestling game and some level of toughness, Eblen can do that. And these are people that are picking Bo Nichols to destroy him. Okay. Eblen's about as big as Bo Nichols. I don't get it. And also on the Pereira front, just because transitioning here, there's a lot of hate being thrown at Pereira for just Joe Rogan saying maybe unintentionally, maybe intentionally. I don't know because Rogan seems to like Pereira, so it's a bit weird. But he said, like, Pereira is like essentially cheating by being as big as he is. There's a lot of downsides to weight cuts, like on a durability and on a stamina level, that I think get forgotten about. And the thing is that as long as cutting massive amounts of weight is legal, these conversations are useless, because as long as Pereira can make 185 the day before the fight, my guy is a middleweight, not a light heavyweight. There you go. I'm not saying don't talk about size, because size is a factor in any fight, but it's a bit weird. Usman Nurmagomedov won the title against Patricky Pitbull. Pretty good showing. Kizria beat Daniel Weichel. Terrell Fortune had a random loss to Daniel James, which it hurts, because at one point I was big on Fortune. Like when he came into Bellator, well, he debuted in Bellator actually, but like when he was ripping it up through Bellator, I'm like, this guy looks good. He looks like he's got some submissions. And then he lost to Tim Johnson. And then he, still did well. Beat Side Soma, beat Jack May, beat Matt Mitrione. These are good fighters. Lost to Linton Vassell, and now has lost to Daniel James. I'm just wondering if there's like something inherently not coming together here. Roman Faraldo lost for the first time against Levon Chokeli, which I do like that name. Chokeli. Kilias Mota won again. Sullivan Cauley won. I need to go watch that fight. It's a quick one. It's a minute and 1 second. Like, I kind of want to see it. I don't know. I think Sullivan Cauley is going to be really good. And the rest is card. Nothing to write home about. What about the one stuff? Ratang won. Christian Lee won. Cosmo Alexander won. Surprise, surprise. Cosmo Alexander is back. And Danielle Kelly won her grappling match. I need to go back and watch that as well. These are all available for free. Bellator is up on YouTube. And obviously, one is on Prime. I feel like most of us have Prime. I feel like that's the case. So, check it out. I can't vouch for the one stuff, but there were some good fights on the Bellator fight card. Next, okay. I got some time here. Let's talk about something here. There's a lot of conversation going on about, like, is the UFC shutting down the women's featherweight division? And what does it mean? So, I think the answer is obviously yes. Because, number one, if we look at the number of women who have fought exclusively as featherweights in the UFC, the list is as follows. Megan Anderson, Cyborg Santos, Zara Farron, Daniel Wolfe, Leah Letson, Eileen Perez, Felicia Spencer. 7 fighters in the history of this division have actually been in it and not been bantamweights. I guess you could argue Chelsea Chandler is yet to actually make bantamweight, so I guess you could give her as an 8th fighter. But you couple that with the fact that the UFC has been, or at least the fighters have stated, Macy Chiasson, Norma Dumas, Chelsea Chandler, I suspect Ramona Pasquale as well, have stated that they have been forced down to 135. And Chiasson, in particular, has stated, is cryptically basically saying this could be really, really bad. Which I agree. Chiasson is 5'11" and fairly thickly built. Woman's a featherweight. They're going to make her cut a lot of weight. Chelsea Chandler and Norma Dumas have made 135 before. And I think they absolutely can. But they both have looked incredibly flat at 135 when they've had to do it. So I don't know why you would want it. I don't know why you would sign these girls. Like, you're signing Chandler, who's fighting at 145, and you're like, all right, make 135. Why did you sign them? And this also begs this is also something I think people don't fully understand. A lot of people think that are arguing that the division, that the division being shut down will just present opportunities for the girls that can't make 135, because they'll be able to go out and fight Kayla Harrison or go to Bellator to fight Cyborg or whatever and do their thing. Here's the problem. The UFC still has them on contract. Your contract is not weight class driven. To my knowledge, all the contracts that have been brought up in the antitrust lawsuit, for example, and provided examples of, they don't have a signing for a weight class. The UFC doesn't come up to me and say, Mike, we are signing you to fight at heavyweight. They say we are signing you for X fights, compensation, and there is some language about them having to offer fights to keep the contract valid. And there is some language that suggests that they probably cannot just offer you, like, they can't offer Demetrius Johnson when he was under contract. Or, trying to think of a better example. Trying to think of someone who's playing hardball with the UFC right now and wants out. Let's say Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz was the classic one. They couldn't just offer him heavyweight fights. They presumably had to stick to like 155 and 170 fights. But that's about it. So if the UFC does shut down the featherweight division, these ladies are still going to be on contract. And knowing the UFC, it kind of depends. Like, do they actually worry about Kayla Harrison and Cyborg taking eyeballs away and forming some level of competition? I think the answer is probably no. But if they do, they could just hold them hostage and do what they've been doing. They're like Norma Dumont, go down to 135. Chelsea Chandler, go down to 135. Aspen Ladd, no, we won't book you at 145. Go to 135, or there's a door. There is a chance that they may just get the very few girls at featherweight may just end up getting stuck on contracts or like forced to cut unhealthy amounts of weight. In the case of Macy Chiesa. So I don't know. I don't love it. And the UFC talks about wanting to have more belts and have more ways to headline things and how they need active champions. Well, you have a weight class that you haven't signed anyone for. Yes, women's featherweight sucks, globally speaking. But how do you make it better? You book the fights. You make it a viable destination for people to actually go to. And then maybe you encourage people to actually fight at the weight class. You encourage athletic women who are in that weight range to actually compete in MMA. Because MMA is actually one of the very, very few sports that offers wage parity amongst the genders to a certain degree. Anyways, that's my thoughts. Would I enjoy seeing them build a featherweight division for women? Not really, but who knows? Maybe the end of the day, you'll get an actual decent result. Because keep in mind, women's flyweight sucked when it started. It's pretty okay now. Women's bantamweight sucked when it started. It's still pretty bad, but it's occasionally entertaining. And women's strawweight, when it started, wasn't very good, and it now is very good. There you go. To the left, to the right, above or below, you're going to find a Linktree link and a Discord link. Join the Discord if you want to join for mixed martial arts simulation action, as well as Slam Ball Pro Wrestling. We are doing, right after I finish this podcast and get it uploading, we're doing Costa Rica Deathmatch, which is the bloodiest, no rules fighting you've ever seen on the sim. And we also have Slam Ball. I think I mentioned Slam Ball Pro Wrestling. And also on the Linktree, you'll find my Twitter, various places to find this podcast, my Twitch channel where I do gaming, my gaming YouTube channel, and that's about it. So check it out, give it a like, let's have a conversation, and I will see you next time.